What's going on YouTube? This is Kelvin, and in continuing my beginner series, I wanted to go ahead and talk about a chess concept, and that is of en passant. Now, for you guys that just started playing or who have been playing for a while, you've definitely noticed some chess terms that are in another language. Chess has quite a bit of chess terms that are in German, and it has one that's in French, and that's en passant. And so in French, en passant means in passing. And so we're going to go ahead and take a look and see what that looks like using the actual pawns. Now, for those of you who aren't fully familiar with how pawns move, I'm going to be making another video explaining how pawns move in the initial part of the game. And if you watch that video as well as this video, you'll get a full understanding of how the pawns move with respect to each other and how en passant actually works. So in this position, we have white's pawns on their starting rank, the second rank, and naturally black's starting rank is right here. And so we just kind of have black's pieces configured in, just a random way. So let's go ahead and give black the first move, and then we'll give white the second move. So let's say, for example, black says, okay, hey, I'm going to move my pawn up one. All right, cool. So now as white's turn, let's say, for example, white wants to move this pawn. So they move the pawn 2 spaces out on their first move. Now, this is where en passant comes in. Anytime that the opposing player moves a pawn up exactly next to your pawn, you have the ability to capture just like how you would if you were capturing anyway, in a diagonal fashion. And then you take that pawn off the board, and that completes en passant. Now, it definitely looks a little weird when you first look at it, because if we back up, we make the initial move for black, and then we make the initial move for white. It definitely takes a little while for you to kind of get familiar and used to, that being a type of move, because like I said, it looks really weird at first. You're like, how can I do that? But that is en passant. And so if we reset the board here, and let's say we move over to this example. Now, let's say this black pawn says, hey, I want to move forward a square. That's really all I can do. Moves up 1. Now, you also, as white, you have the ability to move 1 square or 2 squares, on your very first move. And so let's say, for example, you're like, well, hey, I don't like that pawn attacking my pawn, so let me just move 1 square up. You might be thinking, well, wait a minute. In this position, this white pawn moved right next to my pawn, so can I do the en passant and take the pawn off that way? That's a good question. But because the pawn is engaged with the white pawn immediately in front of it, it doesn't qualify. It has to be 2 squares out in front of your pawn. And then, like I said, you go up 2 squares next to it, and then you take en passant that way. So if this setup right here, go 1 move out, you're basically just locked with your pawns. The same thing as if you were to move out 2 spaces. It might seem like it'd be the same thing, like can I do en passant there, but neither one of those situations actually qualify. I believe that this rule was created so that way, let's say, for example, you just have these 2 pawns on the board, and this pawn moves up. This rule was created so that way this pawn can't just pass by the other pawn just uncontested. And then, so let's say, for example, you have this situation, right? If you were to move the pawn past this pawn, now this pawn really doesn't have any way to, before the rule, it didn't have any way to really contest this. So they put that in there now, so that way you can't just freely just move your pawn, past the other pawns. So just backing up here, like I said, this pawn moves up. It's 2 ranks in front of the other pawns. This pawn makes its first move, and then you can diagonally take, and that's en passant. Of course, it's the same as if you're here, and then that's en passant this way. All right, guys, like I said, I'm going to be making another video on the initial rules of pawns. So if you want to watch that one, in conjunction with this one. It'll give you a more complete understanding of how pawns move with respect to each other and just the general rules at the start of a chess game with pawns. So I appreciate it, guys. Go ahead and subscribe and give me a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, appreciate it.